dead zones are hypoxic areas in the world's oceans and large lakes, caused by excessive nutrient pollution from human activities coupled with other factors that deplete the oxygen required to support most marine life in bottom and near bottom water. In the 1970s, oceanographers began noting increased instances of dead zones. These occur near inhabited coastlines, where aquatic life is most concentrated. In March 2004, when the recently established UN Environment Programme published its first Global Environment Outlook Year Book, it reported 146 dead zones in the world's oceans where marine life could not be supported due to depleted oxygen levels. Some of these were as small as a square kilometre, but the largest dead zone covered 70,000 square kilometres. A 2008 study counted 405 dead zones worldwide. Causes: aquatic and marine dead zones can be caused by an increase in chemical nutrients in the water, known as eutrophication. These chemicals are the fundamental building blocks of single-celled, plant-like organisms that live in the water column, and whose growth is limited in part by the availability of these materials. Eutrophication can lead to rapid increases in the density of certain types of these phytoplankton, a phenomenon known as an algal bloom. Internationally celebrated limnologist Dr. David Schindler, notable for research at the experimental lakes area which led to the banning of harmful phosphates in detergents, warned about algal blooms and dead zones. The fish-killing blooms that devastated the Great Lakes in the 1960s and 1970s haven't gone away. They've moved west into an arid world in which people, industry, and agriculture are increasingly taxing the quality of what little fresh water there is to be had here. This isn't just a prairie problem. Global expansion of dead zones caused by algal blooms is rising rapidly. Schindler and Valentin 2008. The major groups of algae are cyanobacteria, green algae, dinoflagellates, coccolithophores and diatom algae. Increase in input of nitrogen and phosphorus generally causes cyanobacteria to bloom, and this causes dead zones. Cyanobacteria are not good food for zooplankton and fish and hence accumulate in water, die, and then decompose. Other algae are consumed and hence do not accumulate to the same extent as cyanobacteria. Dead zones can be caused by natural and by anthropogenic factors. Use of chemical fertilizers is considered the major human-related cause of dead zones around the world. Natural causes include coastal upwelling and changes in wind and water circulation patterns. Runoff from sewage, urban land use, and fertilizers can also contribute to eutrophication. Notable dead zones in the United States include the northern Gulf of Mexico region, surrounding the outfall of the Mississippi River, and the coastal regions of the Pacific Northwest, and the Elizabeth River and Virginia Beach, all of which have been shown to be recurring events over the last several years. Additionally, natural oceanographic phenomena can cause deoxygenation of parts of the water column. For example, enclosed bodies of water, such as fjords or the Black Sea, have shallow sills at their entrances, causing water to be stagnant there for a long time. The eastern tropical Pacific Ocean and northern Indian Ocean have lowered oxygen concentrations which are thought to be in regions where there is minimal circulation to replace the oxygen that is consumed. These areas are also known as oxygen minimum zones. In many cases, OMZs are permanent or semi-permanent areas. Remains of organisms found within sediment layers near the mouth of the Mississippi River indicate 4 hypoxic events before the advent of artificial fertilizer. In these sediment layers, anoxia-tolerant species are the most prevalent remains found. The periods indicated by the sediment record correspond to historic records of high river flow recorded by instruments at Vicksburg, Mississippi. Changes in ocean circulation triggered by ongoing climate change could also add or magnify other causes of oxygen reductions in the ocean. Effects. Low oxygen levels recorded along the Gulf Coast of North America have led to reproductive problems in fish involving decreased size of reproductive organs, low egg counts and lack of spawning. In a study of the Gulf killifish by the Southeastern Louisiana University done in 3 bays along the Gulf Coast, fish living in bays where the oxygen levels in the water dropped to 1 to 2 parts per million for 3 or more hours per day were found to have smaller reproductive organs. The male gonads were 34% to 50% as large as males of similar size in bays where the oxygen levels were normal. Females were found to have ovaries that were half as large as those in normal oxygen levels. The number of eggs in females living in hypoxic waters were only 1/7 the number of eggs in fish living in normal oxygen levels. Fish raised in laboratory-created hypoxic conditions showed extremely low sex hormone concentrations and increased elevation of activity in two genes triggered by the hypoxia and ductile factor protein. Under hypoxic conditions, HIF pairs with another protein, ARNT. The two then bind to DNA in cells, activating genes in those plant cells. Under normal oxygen conditions, ARNT combines with estrogen to activate genes. Hypoxic cells in vitro did not react to estrogen placed in the tube. HIF appears to render ARNT unavailable to interact with estrogen, providing a mechanism by which hypoxic conditions alter reproduction in fish. It might be expected that fish would flee this potential suffocation, but they are often quickly rendered unconscious and doomed. Slow-moving bottom-dwelling creatures like clams, lobsters and oysters are unable to escape. All colonial animals are extinguished. The normal remineralization and recycling that occurs among benthic life forms is stifled. Mora al. 2013 showed that future changes in oxygen could affect most marine ecosystems and have socio-economic ramifications due to human dependency on marine goods and services. Locations. In the 1970s, marine dead zones were first noted in areas where intensive economic use stimulated first-world scientific scrutiny, in the U.S. East Coast's Chesapeake Bay, in Scandinavia's strait called the Kattegat, which is the mouth of the Baltic Sea, and in other important Baltic Sea fishing grounds, in the Black Sea, and in the northern Adriatic. Other marine dead zones have appeared in coastal waters of South America, China, Japan, and New Zealand. A 2008 study counted 405 dead zones worldwide. Baltic Sea. Lake Erie. A dead zone exists in the central part of Lake Erie from east of Point Pelee to Long Point and stretches to shores in Canada and the United States. The zone has been noticed since the 1950s to 1960s, but efforts since the 1970s have been made by Canada and the U.S. to reduce runoff pollution into the lake as means to reverse the dead zone growth. Overall, the lake's oxygen level is poor, with only a small area to the east of Long Point that has better levels. The biggest impact of the poor oxygen levels is to marine life and fisheries industry. Lower St. Lawrence Estuary. A dead zone exists in the lower St. Lawrence River area from east the Saguenay River to east of Barry-Camo, greatest at depths over 275 meters and noticed since the 1930s. The main concerns for Canadian scientists is the impact of fish found in the area. Oregon, off the coast of Cape Perpetua, Oregon, there is also a dead zone with a 2006 reported size of 300 square miles. This dead zone only exists during the summer, perhaps due to wind patterns. Gulf of Mexico Dead Zone. Currently, the Gulf of Mexico's dead zone, off the coast of Louisiana and Texas, is the largest hypoxic zone in the United States. The Mississippi River, which is the drainage area for 41% of the continental United States, dumps high-nutrient runoff such as nitrogen and phosphorus into the Gulf of Mexico. According to a 2009 fact sheet created by NOAA, 70% of nutrient loads that cause hypoxia are a result of this vast drainage basin, which includes the heart of U.S. agribusiness, the Midwest. The discharge of treated sewage from urban areas combined with agricultural runoff deliver c. 1.7 million tons of potassium and nitrogen into the Gulf of Mexico every year. Size of Gulf of Mexico Dead Zone. The frequency of occurrence of hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico hypoxic zone was mapped annually every summer from 1985 through 1999. The size varies annually from a record high in 2002 when it encompassed more than 21,756 square kilometers to a record low in 1988 of 39 square kilometers. In 2010 it was the size of New Jersey. Nancy Rabelais of the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium and Cockatry predict the dead zone or hypoxic zone in 2012 will cover an area of 17,353 square kilometers, which is larger than Connecticut. In 2011 it was about 17,521 square kilometers. In 2014, the Gulf of Mexico was 5,052 square miles, a shrinking from previous years, but nowhere near the trim that scientists had hoped for. In late summer 1988 the dead zone disappeared as the Great Drought caused the flow of Mississippi to fall to its lowest level since 1933. During times of heavy flooding in the Mississippi River Basin, as in 1993, the dead zone dramatically increased in size, approximately 5,000 km larger than the previous year. On average the dead zone doubled in size since the late 1980s. Hypoxia in bottom waters covered an average of 8,000 euro 9,000 kilometers due in 1985 euro 92 but increased to 16,000 euro 20,000 kilometers due in 1993 euro 99. In March 1998, the National Science and Technology Council's Committee on Environment and Natural Resources and the Mississippi River Gulf of Mexico Watershed Nutrient Task Force developed and approved an assessment plan calling for 6 teams of experts from inside and outside of government to perform in-depth studies examining the issue of hypoxia and the watershed Euro-Gulf system, including oceanographic, hydrologic, agricultural and economic factors. There is some concern that the Deepwater Horizon oil spill from April to July 2010 may have significantly affected the dead zone. However, Terry Hazen, a microbial ecologist with the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, has suggested that the oil released from the spill did not travel far enough west in appreciable quantities to affect the current size of the dead zone. Economic impact of Gulf of Mexico dead zone. The dead zone threatens lucrative commercial and recreational fisheries in the Gulf of Mexico. In 2009, the dockside value of commercial fisheries in the Gulf was $629 million. Nearly 3 million recreational fishers further contributed about $10 billion to the Gulf economy, taking 22 million fishing trips. Scientists are not in universal agreement that nutrient loading has a negative impact on fisheries. Grimes makes a case that nutrient loading enhances the fisheries in the Gulf of Mexico. Courtney Ale assert that nutrient loading has made significant contributions to the increases in red snapper production in the northern and western Gulf of Mexico. History of Gulf of Mexico dead zone. Shrimp trawlers first reported a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico in 1950, but it wasn't until 1970, when the size of the hypoxic zone had increased, that scientists began to investigate. The conversion of forests and wetlands for agricultural and urban developments accelerated after 1950. Missouri River Basin has had hundreds of thousands of acres of forests and wetlands replaced with agriculture activity. In the lower Mississippi, 1/3 of the valley's forests were converted to agriculture between 1950 and 1976. A dead zone off the coast of Texas where the Brazos River empties into the Gulf was also discovered in July 2007. Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007. The Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 calls for the production of 36 billion U.S. gallons of renewable fuels by 2022, including 15 billion U.S. gallons of corn-based ethanol, a tripling of current production that would require a similar increase in corn production. Unfortunately, the plan poses a new problem. The increase in demand for corn production results in a proportional increase in nitrogen runoff. Although nitrogen, which makes up 78% of the Earth's atmosphere, is an inert gas, it has more reactive forms, one of which is used to make fertilizer. According to Fred Below, a professor of crop physiology at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, corn requires more nitrogen-based fertilizer because it produces a higher grain per unit area than other crops and, unlike other crops, corn is completely dependent on available nitrogen in soil. The results, reported March 18, 2008 in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, showed that scaling up corn production to meet the 15 billion U.S. gallon goal would increase nitrogen loading in the dead zone by 18%. This would boost nitrogen levels to twice the level recommended by the Mississippi Basin Gulf of Mexico Water Nutrient Task Force, a coalition of federal, state, and tribal agencies that has monitored the dead zone since 1997. The task force says a 30% reduction of nitrogen runoff is needed if the dead zone is to shrink. Reversal: dead zones are reversible, though numerous extinct organisms that are lost due to its appearance are not. The Black Sea Dead Zone, previously the largest in the world, largely disappeared between 1991 and 2001 after fertilizers became too costly to use following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the demise of centrally planned economies in Eastern and Central Europe. Fishing has again become a major economic activity in the region. While the Black Sea cleanup was largely unintentional and involved a drop in hard-to-control fertilizer usage, the UN has advocated other cleanups by reducing large industrial emissions. From 1985 to 2000, the North Sea Dead Zone had nitrogen reduced by 37% when policy efforts by countries on the Rhine River reduced sewage and industrial emissions of nitrogen into the water. Other cleanups have taken place along the Hudson River and San Francisco Bay. The chemical aluminium sulfate can be used to reduce phosphates in water. See also. Notes. References: Diaz, R.J. Rosenberg, Are Spreading Dead Zones and Consequences for Marine Ecosystems. Science 321, 926 €929 doi, 10.1126/Science 1156401. PMIDA 18703733 Osterman, L.E., al. 2004. Reconstructing an 180-year record of natural and anthropogenic-induced hypoxia from the sediments of the Louisiana continental shelf. Geological Society of America meeting. November 7 to 10. Denver. Abstract. Pickard, G.L. and Emery, W.J. 1982. Description Physical Oceanography, An Introduction. Pergamon Press, Oxford, 249 pp. Landry, C.A., S. Manning, and A.O. Cheek. 2004. Hypoxia suppresses reproduction in Gulf killifish, Fundulus grandis e hormone 2004 conference. October 27 to 30. New Orleans. Johanning, K., A. al. 2004. Assessment of molecular interaction between low oxygen and estrogen in fish cell culture. 4th SETAC World Congress, 25th Annual Meeting in North America. November 14 to 18. Portland, OR. Abstract. Taylor, F.J. Taylor, New Jersey. Walsby, J. A bloom of planktonic diatrums Ceratulina pelagica off the coastal northeastern New Zealand in 1983, and its contribution to an associated mortality of fish and benthic fauna. International Review Gis. Hydrobial 70, 773 €795, Marizzi, D.J. Predicting Impacts and Recovery of Marine Farm Sites in Stewart Island, New Zealand, from the Findlay-Watling Model. Aquaculture 185, 257 €271, Potera, C. Corn ethanol goal revives dead zone concerns. Environmental Health Perspectives 116, A242 A243. Further reading, David Storth, Hypoxic Dead Zone Growing Off the Oregon Coast July 31, 2006, Susie Greenhalgh and Amanda Sauer, Awakening the Dead Zone and Investment for Agriculture, Water Quality, and Climate Change 2003, Nutrient Net, an online nutrient trading tool developed by the World Resources Institute, designed to address issues of eutrophication. See also the PA Nutrient Net website designed for Pennsylvania's nutrient trading program. Raised Tirado Dead Zones, How Agricultural Fertilizers Are Killing Our Rivers, Lakes and Oceans. Greenpeace Publications. See also, Dead Zones, How Agricultural Fertilizers Are Killing Our Rivers, Lakes and Oceans. Greenpeace Canada. July 7, 2008. Retrieved August 3, 2010. A MSNBC report on dead zones, March 29, 2004. Joel Achenbach, A Dead Zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Scientists say area that cannot support some marine life is near record size. Washington Post, July 31, 2008. Joel Achenbach, dead zones appear in waters worldwide. New study estimates more than 400. Washington Post, August 15, 2008. External links. Louisiana University's Marine Consortium Union GEO Year Book 2003 Report on Nitrogen and Dead Zones, NASA on Dead Zones, Gulf of Mexico Dead Zone, Multimedia, Gulf of Mexico Hypoxia Watch, NOAA Joel Achenbach.